Good afternoon and welcome back to Tactics Board. Norwich City are absolutely flying, and today we're taking a look at their next championship game away at Huddersfield Town. And it may seem on paper like it will be an easy one, but tactically it's going to be quite complex. It's going to be different to the tests Norwich have faced already so far this season, and we're going to break down some of the challenges that David Wagner's side may face on his return to Yorkshire. I'm also going to give you my predicted 11 for the game, and we're going to get straight into that. This is the team that I think Wagner will pick for the Huddersfield game. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson at centre back, Dimitris Yannoulis at left back, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean in the centre of midfield, Christian Fastnacht on the right, John Rowe on the left, and Josh Sargent and Ashley Barnes up front. And that may sound familiar, and that's because it's the exact team that David Wagner chose for Norwich's 3-1 win over Millwall on Sunday, and I don't see that changing for any reason. As much as there are slight nuances that mean this game will look different to that Millwall one, I think fundamentally, in terms of the players they're going to need, it's going to be a similar task. It's going to be a team that Norwich have to sit in front of and break down really and play through the lines to get at. So I think that team has proven that it can do it. It's got the right players, and clearly under David Wagner, it's the right team in the right system to produce results in that sort of scenario. They already beat Hull 2-1 and they sort of tried to sit behind the ball and play in a low block. Then they did the same thing against Millwall, and I think they'll face, if not a slightly more difficult, slightly more complex task, they'll face a similar thing against Huddersfield. And just to quickly take you through it, I won't analyse it in as much detail as usual because I think it is fairly predictable, and I would be very surprised, injury allowing, of course, that if David Wagner chose a different team. But Gunn, to me, is irreplaceable, especially since Tim Krul left the club. The back four, I think Jack Stacey actually probably had his worst game of the season so far on Sunday. I think there were definitely areas for improvement, but he seems like somebody who will take that in the best possible way and will bounce back from it. So I think he could be vital. Across the back line, I think defensively they were actually excellent. Ben Gibson left the pitch. He was obviously replaced by Andrew Omobamidele, but he left the pitch with a clean sheet. Shane Duffy would have been disappointed that he was out-jumped in the lead-up to that goal. But for the majority of the game, when Norwich were focused and they weren't home and hosed as they were when that goal went in, they defended really well. They didn't really let any chances against them. And I would be surprised if that defence changes. Same with the midfield, which could be the best midfield two in the Championship. Gabriel Sara, I've seen spoken about even amongst sort of national outlets outside of the Norwich City bubble as the best player in the Championship so far this season, and he just has so much class. Kenny McLean, still an underrated player for me, but one of the key men and somebody who I don't expect to see replaced very soon. On the wings, not too much option for Wagner. I don't think anybody's stood out in that position so far, apart from Rowe and Fastnacht. Obviously, Ono Hernandez still recovering from a broken hand, and we will get more updates from David Wagner later today in his press conference. But for now, it looks like Fastnacht and Rowe are very secure in those wide positions. And then up front, the duo of Josh Sargent and Ashley Barnes have been one of the most impressive components of this Norwich team so far this season. So despite Adam Ida's last-minute winner against Hull, they've been able to keep the competition away, and they've been able to stay in the team, and I expect that to be the case again against Huddersfield. And I'm just going to break down some of the elements of this game that I think will go in Norwich's favour and some of them that I think go against them. But we'll start with a positive for Norwich, and that's that the issues Neil Warnock teams have provided them with before, I don't think will really apply as much to this David Wagner side. One contest really stands out to me when I think of Neil Warnock and how he might try to counteract Norwich City playing, and that is the 0-0 draw with Middlesbrough at Carrow Road in early 2021. I want to say Emi Buendia got sent off, and the main thing that earned a point for Middlesbrough against the dominant Canaries that season was that they man-marked all of Norwich's key players, and the fluidity that stood out in the team that season really wasn't able to flourish, because Middlesbrough's own defence was so fluid that the chaos they caused in most team structures wasn't really valid. They weren't able to unsettle teams and give fullbacks and midfielders and strikers decisions to make, because Warnock had just told his players follow them around, whereas a lot of the time that season it was Todd Cantwell playing between a fullback and a centre-back and making players decide which one of them had to mark him and which player had to come slightly out of position to deal with him. Against Warnock sides, that didn't really work so well. Of course, it was a similar case with Buendia on the other side, who was the key man for Norwich at the time. But why I don't think that applies so much to this Norwich City side is that there is a bit more structure to how they play. So nullifying the rotation of the team and the fluidity of the team doesn't actually take that much away from Norwich, because they're not especially fluid. They do swap lines fairly often, and the way that they attack, their structure in attack looks quite different to their structure in defence, but you don't often see the likes of Sarah popping up in a wide position, or Rowe maybe in a striker's position. I mean, Josh Sargent or Ashley Barnes, one of them will drop deep to receive the ball, but apart from that, nobody is really coming out of the structure to give defenders decisions to make. So as much as the man marking may be a strength for Huddersfield, and they may be able to find a way to make that a problem for Norwich, it won't be in the same way that it's affected them previously. This Wagner side can play through the thirds very well and can play through the lines and can pass it well, contrary to what I think a lot of people were thinking this Wagner football would look like. But they aren't as reliant on fluidity and rotation as they were under Farker, so having that taken away, as Warnock's sides look to do, won't provide much of a problem for them. But what might provide a problem for them is the fact that Huddersfield like to swarm in wide areas, and that's how they like to do a lot of their pressing. They like to funnel the ball out wide, which is a tactic Norwich actually quite like to do themselves, and then they use those vulnerable situations. Of course, the touchline is a favourable element for the defensive team in that scenario, and Huddersfield really like to pounce when that's a factor. And why that might be a problem for Norwich is because of how important the fullbacks and the wide areas are for them and have been for them this season. Of course, we've seen Dimi Yunulis and Jack Stacey flourish, and that's not a coincidence or just because they're very good technical players. It's because Wagner's system is set up to make the most of those fullbacks and to get them forward and get them attacking. And Huddersfield's system does really well to nullify threat from wide areas when it's at its best. And I suppose the way of combating that for Norwich will be either to just believe that they have the quality to play through that, and they do have two very good technical fullbacks in those areas, or they can use it to create space for their central players, which also are obviously very, very good at this level. And it might give Gabriel Sara a little bit more room to operate in the middle, a little bit more space to maybe fire off those long shots, which he's become well known for, and which he's scored a number of goals from now. So there are always weaknesses to tactical setups, especially when overloads and committing players to certain areas of the pitch are involved. But just for Norwich, I think this may present a unique problem for them because those wide areas are so important for them. But equally, it gives Warnock a decision, because I would say he loves man-marking those key players, and if he's got enough players in there to nullify Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean, then he might not be able to commit them to the wide areas. So it's an interesting decision for Warnock to make. I think Norwich will profit from that either way, but they'll also suffer from that either way, and it'll be interesting to see which side comes out on top. And in terms of the attack they'll have to deal with, Huddersfield are quite similar to Norwich at their best, really. They like to counter, and they do that in a slightly different way. It's slightly more direct. Norwich will still look to keep the ball on the floor, even if they're passing very, very quickly and as forward as they possibly can. They do keep it on the floor, and they do still play the thirds, even though there are gaps in there. Huddersfield will just get the ball and try and find the furthest forward player as quickly as they can, and they have the pace to do that. They have the players on the wings, Josh Koroma and Sorba Thomas on the wings can really provide you with problems, and I think they have before, but they are also your sort of typical Championship wingers in that they can probably go a whole game without actually providing much end product, and that is why Huddersfield are probably in the area of the table they are, and a lot of people are expecting them to be in. So it will rely on them having a good day if they're to cause Norwich problems, but equally the danger of those wide areas combined with the fact that they like to press in those areas and that Norwich's fullbacks play so far forward may be a problem for Norwich, especially given the lack of pace in that central defensive partnership which Wagner has gone with so far of Duffy and Gibson. So that will be an interesting part to follow, but I think quality-wise Norwich should have the ability to win this game comfortably. Of course, they went to the John Smith Stadium last year, and despite Huddersfield not having a shot on target, they drew 1-1 with Norwich and caused a significant blow to their playoff hopes. So it's definitely not somewhere where you can take 3 points for granted, especially when Neil Warnock is involved, and there will be a number of problems for David Wagner to solve. I'm interested to see if he can solve them though, and I'm excited to watch another Norwich performance. And how long has it been since we've been able to say that? I'm looking forward to seeing this team play again, and I hope you are too. If you want to keep up with every kick from the John Smith Stadium, you can subscribe to Pinken Plus at pinken.com/subscribe. I believe it's only $1.99 for 2 months and then $2.99 thereafter, which as much as I'm very biased, I think is fantastic value. We'll have plenty of subscriber exclusive content around the match and in the week around that. So yeah, keep it locked to our channels, and I'll see you on Tactics Board very soon.